I feel like a lot of students are pressured into cheating if they feel like they are not prepared for a test because they're held at such high standards by themselves and their parents, and they don't want to let themselves or their parents down.
Have you ever cheated?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I do just about anything to pass. Even cheating feels like less of a personal failure. Very few teachers actually care to make sure everyone knows the material. I don't care if I'm cheating as long as I get away with it. I've learned more from finding new ways to do things than in a classroom.
Why do you cheat?
I run out of time to do it on my own.
Because I didn't know the materials. I want to get good grades.
I was probably in a rush. Homework assignments back in the day. Quick shade off before class. Those were the good old days.
I rarely copy homework. In fact, I only did it once, and I did it because I've been way too depressed to motivate to do anything. I know depression isn't something to use as an excuse for homework, but if you are so sad and upset that you don't have any motivation to do anything, it's hard to do work. So the next day when I feel terrible for not doing my work, I copy off a friend's work. I know it's not right, and I hate doing it, but I always get too nervous for my class to say I didn't do the homework. I do it just so I can hand something in.
How have you cheated?
By like looking at my phone, by writing answers on my hands.
I just kind of look for others who have already done it.
I let people cheat on me a lot, but really I just look at other people's papers.
Copied off of a friend when I was younger, or probably like lied about an assignment that I did. Sometimes you just forget to do your homework, and it's like, you got it done.
Students are driven to get good grades, and a major motive behind this is the pressure to do so. Some students shared their stories about cheating.
I feel guilty every single time I cheat, I honestly do. And a lot of other people do too.
My parents really make me feel like I have to do good in school. Failing isn't an option, and it is really hard. I try hard not to cheat, but the pressure of grades sometimes proves to be too much. I wish it was not like this.
Teachers don't think about all the other homework we have to do. And this survey didn't account for the fact that when I get home, I'm so emotionally exhausted that I feel like I need to sleep for 3 hours, and I'm so brain dead I can barely comprehend the homework assignments. It's ridiculous and something has to be done.
When interviewed, here's what Gorham High School students had to say.
Is there too much pressure on students to do well?
Definitely. It's too focused on grades. I feel like in half of my classes I'm not learning anything because I'm just memorizing and then forgetting after the test.
I don't think for all students. I think some students put pressure on themselves and maybe others get pressure from parents or teachers. But I know for me, I don't think there's pressure from the outside. I think it's mostly myself, just trying to make myself do my best, I guess.
I think it depends on the kid. I think that like my parents like expect me to do well, and my teachers expect me to do well because like a good kid, I guess. But like some students who like don't have expectations, I think that like their parents don't have expectations for them, so they don't do what you want, kind of thing.
The average in grades has gotten higher. There's definitely higher expectations. College has gotten a lot more competitive because everyone goes now, pretty much. So I think there's definitely a lot more competition with grades, and there's a lot of stress around trying to keep up with that.
I think that's shown a lot with like mental health wise, because a lot of people think that mental health should come after school, and like parents think that way, and a lot of students are just programmed to think that way, that their grades are more important than how they're feeling, and that's really messed up.
I would say yes, and I've noticed a lot more of the stress this year because of colleges and stuff like that, so I feel like since we have to send in our transcripts, there is a lot more pressure this year with wanting to do well and obviously get accepted somewhere.
I feel like a lot of teachers have the mentality that their class is the most important and that their class is the class that you should be focusing on most, when in reality that may not be the case. There's a lot of pressure on students to do well. There's a lot of pressure of like, if you don't do well, you're not going to get into a good college. If you don't get into a good college, you're not going to get a good job. If you don't get a good job, you're going to suck. Pretty much. Like, you're not going to make it far in life and stuff. So they really drill into us that getting good grades like determines the rest of your life, and that's really, really stressful.
According to the National Sleep Foundation, teens should get between 8 and 10 hours of sleep per night. Of the 307 GHS students surveyed, 30.5% only get 7 hours, and 23% only get 6. 56.2% of surveyed students have 2 to 3 hours of homework per night, spread out across 7 classes. Combined with the amount of time that it takes for students to get ready in the morning, attend classes, travel, work, and participate in extracurricular activities, the average DHS student only has about 15 minutes of spare time per day.
The pressure on students to do well in school seems primarily focused on the idea of getting good grades to please parents of possible colleges, but what about the actual knowledge?
Are grades viewed as being more important than knowledge, would you say?
I think that people say that they're a measure of knowledge, but it's not accurate to say that they're a measure of knowledge. I don't know if it's more valuable necessarily, but certainly at the beginning of your life, or relatively the beginning, meaning college, and it is considered probably more important. But after college, your knowledge, I think, is more based on how you perform in the workplace and in college, I suppose.
I think we've created a culture here in school and in our our larger culture, that has put so much pressure on grades, GPA, what kind of college to get into, a certain tier college, that whole grade is the end all be all, rather than what I think probably a lot of teachers view as what's really important is the actual knowledge, the value of learning, what we're teaching in the classroom, sort of intrinsically what you learn, also learning how to learn, having the discipline, investing in reading for the sake of reading, or doing math for your logical ability rather than getting the grade. I hear from students all the time how stressed they are about grades and how they need honors and they need high honors, and can they please do extra credit for that point, and it just makes me feel bad for them. It's sad that there's that much stress, that they spend so much time focusing on that they don't even have the energy to focus on the other.
I think that a lot of times people do think of grades as more important than knowledge. I personally think that knowledge is more important than grades, but even in my own life, I often find myself being more motivated by grades than by knowledge. So if there's an important test coming up, I'll study for that because of the grade, not necessarily because I want to have more knowledge.
I think as a society, we look at school as a place of learning, a place where you're supposed to gain knowledge. And I think that's why schools exist, so that we can learn things. But I think a lot of the time it comes down to you have to accomplish this task to move on to this next task, to move on to this next course, to be able to pass this grade. So even if the philosophy and the goals are lofty and about learning and knowledge and being good citizens and the things that we want students to become, I think the daily nitty-gritty ends up a lot of times falling into, kind of getting grades and accomplishing tasks. We lose sight of the big picture sometimes, I think.
I've gotten to the point where it's like I'm just going through the motions to get the good grade and not like acquiring any real knowledge.
I think students think grades are very, very important. I think that motivates them to work hard on particular assignments. They see grades as part of what will make them successful in the future, getting into a good college, thus getting a career that they find fulfilling. So I think grades are important.
By students, I think many students do view grades more important than knowledge. I think when things are returned, the first question is what grade did I get on it, not what did I understand or not understand. I think the way that translates for the school is that the school gets confused about what is more important, grades or knowledge. Grades are what kind of keep us in line, so to speak, right? We've got to report them, so that's what dictates our calendar. But, at the heart of it, I'd say most all teachers would say that the most important thing is the knowledge, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to impart every day.
I think sometimes for students, it's more important that they get a good grade rather than they really understand the information or sort of have that background of knowledge. For me personally, I would much rather have kids really learn something, maybe not do as well grade-wise, but really get that body of knowledge than necessarily have a 98 to show for it. So
In an ongoing study by former Rutgers professor Donald McCabe, he found that the most common way of cheating for students is through homework assignments, closely followed by cheating on a quiz or a test. With a sample of 24,000 students at 70 high schools, McCabe concluded that 95% participated in some form of cheating, whether it was on a test, plagiarism, or copying homework. Of that 95%, 64% of students admitted to cheating on a test and 58% admitted to plagiarism. Interested by the data, we decided to conduct our own study on Gorham's cheating statistics. Over a month-long period, we interviewed teachers and students, as well as sent out a school-wide survey. From a sample of 307 students, 77.5 admitted to cheating at least once. Cheating has been an ongoing problem forever. It's apparent that change needs to be done, but the issue lies with that change actually is. Some schools have been doing more problem-solving based learning. Here's what GHS teachers have to say. Do you think that high schools would benefit from a problem-solving based curriculum as opposed to memorizing facts?
I think you need both. I think that there's times when you definitely need to memorize facts in order to speak the language of whatever it is that you're applying. But I think problem or project-based learning is really, really important to get that real-world application.
My preference would be a system that didn't have grades at all. It was just a process of topics to learn about, experiments or projects or ways to show your learning, and then feedback on that task, whatever the task was, whether it was a project or an essay or creating something. You would then receive feedback on it, make changes, maybe resubmit, do something with the feedback to show further learning, and then continuing on to the next task or next learning experience.
Kids learn differently. Some kids, and adults, I mean, everybody learns differently. Adults learn, there are people who are much better at hands-on learning, and then there are people who are much better visual learners or auditory learners. Like an auditory learner will learn from a lecture and take in a lot because that person's more of, I don't know what kind of thinker I want to call it, but whereas a hands-on person makes more sense out of doing something himself. So I don't think that either extreme is okay. I would support, I really want to have block scheduling here because I think in a 90-minute period, I would never lecture for 90 minutes because too many kids would go to sleep. But we would break it up, maybe do some, because I think there's some value in what the teacher knows. I mean, I like to learn from people who know more than I do, but there's also some value in taking that and then applying it. So I'm sort of that middle of the road, not one extreme or the other, but do a little bit of both so a student isn't just sitting, thinking about what's going to happen this weekend, what I'm going to wear for Halloween on Saturday night while the teacher's droning on like the Charlie Brown wah 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 teacher, but a little bit of information and then take it and use it.
You need to have a balance of both of those things. In order to solve a lot of problems, you need to know some facts, right? So, once again, thinking about this from a science perspective, if you're going to jump into the scientific method, you've got to start out knowing some things that you're going to build your hypothesis and you're going to build your experimental design on. So if you don't have that background knowledge, you can't do the problem solving. So ideally, there would be a balance between those two things.
Grading is probably the least favorite thing about this profession for me. I understand the necessity of having to do it because you need to have measures. The parents need to know, the kid needs to know, the teacher needs to know, because we're in the business of basically certifying people with a diploma, saying they have a core set of knowledge, and this diploma means that we're sending them out in the world with some guarantee that they have that core set of knowledge. So you have to have measurements. But honestly, sometimes grading is very difficult because you want the freedom to grade a kid based on where they were and how far they've come, and not just grade them on, a sort of subjective bar that they have to meet. So it's tricky. Oftentimes I find myself wanting to reward a student for the improvement I know they've shown, but I can't give them a grade just based on that. So there's a lot of tension involved in giving grades.
Students aren't prioritizing knowledge like everyone says we should, but how do we ultimately change that?
I feel like we're expected to always have everything completely under control, and that's not how it really works. Like, not everybody's perfect.
I feel guilty every single time I cheat. I honestly do.
There's a lot of times I get really overwhelmed. I feel like sometimes I just wish everything would stop.
Something has to be done.